Welcome to my review of Final Fight for the Sega CD. And I would say this is one of the top Sega CD games. Even though it's a port, it's an awesome home port of Final Fight. And now when I first played Final Fight, the first time I played it was on the Super Nintendo port, back when that came out. And I wasn't too impressed. I felt the game was pretty sluggish. I mean, it was a nice looking game, but when you played it, it just felt kind of sluggish. Just didn't feel great to play. And it was kind of difficult with the continue system, though I'm not really complaining about difficulty. It was just that the game didn't play well. And, the fact that it was unforgiving with the amount of lives and continues you had, or where it started you from when you died. I think it started you way back on certain parts. Just the mix of all that made it not a very enjoyable game. And the Super Nintendo one also was just single player, so, that was definitely a limitation. So this version fixes a lot of the issues that version had, and it's pretty close to the arcade version. The graphics aren't quite there, but the characters are big. I mean, it looks great. It's not as colorful as the Super Nintendo one, but I mean, that's about the only thing that it's, lacking that the Super Nintendo version had. This game also, it adds back 2-player support, so you got the co-op, which is a huge thing for beat 'em ups. Though it's just a much more fun game to play, even in single player. After playing this version and beating it, which I do have a tutorial for the game, which I will link in the description. I believe this game took me maybe 4 hours to beat, just going off memory. It wasn't, this was the easy mode as well, and it really wasn't easy. It was pretty tough. But, yeah, even playing it, I realized that Final Fight was a much better game than I initially thought. Now, I'm sure I probably played through the arcade version, casually, since it's a coin waster style, which is just pay to win. Keep putting in free credits on MAME, on the emulator. Is probably how I beat it. So, I didn't appreciate it because there was no challenge. Because, I just play through it and put in, fake coins. So, playing this version was the first time I think I appreciated Final Fight and realized that it's, a pretty damn good game. I still hold Streets of Rage games in higher regard for the most part, but I think that this was pretty close. It was a lot closer to Streets of Rage than I thought it was, I could see the argument going either way for somebody liking this game better than Streets of Rage, definitely. But Streets of Rage for me is just a personal preference, and part of that may be that those were the games that I owned. And, I owned the first Streets of Rage only, but still, I rented the second one, and, I was just familiar with that series. So, that's probably part of it, but I just thought it was a real fun game. I mean, as with a lot of these older beat-em-ups by Capcom, there's a very limited move set, but Capcom had a way with these games where they just did it really well, where they, didn't necessarily give you a lot of moves like some of the more advanced beat-em-ups, even though you don't have any running attacks or anything like that. Hagar, he can grab and do these jumping pile drivers, which are great for crowd control. So it kind of gets around that a little bit with that move. And he has he only has a few moves, but they're effective at crowd control. And same with the other character, which I don't really remember the name now because I didn't even use him. But I like Hagar for this game. But both characters are good. They have limited moves, but your enemies don't have that many moves either. There's only a few enemy types really. The soundtrack is very good, as was a lot of Capcom beat 'em ups. But yeah, very fun game to play through. Now this game, as with a lot of the console ports, or all of them probably, has limited continues, so it can still be challenging. Even on easy, you can see it's quite an aggressive game. It definitely wasn't easy. It was challenging. Nothing brutal or anything like that. Not crazy. It wasn't no Streets of Rage 3, which I have a tutorial of that up on the channel as well. That's, a pretty damn hard beat 'em up, especially on the default difficulty. It starts off real hard for the US version. But this was still a challenging game. It was a nice challenge. I mean, it felt like a good challenge where I had to do well and learn the crowd control. And I really enjoyed playing this version. I thought it was a really enjoyable version of the game to play. I can't say the same for the first game on Super Nintendo, but I will say that Final Fight 2 and 3 on Super Nintendo were awesome. I I believe I completed both of those on hard on the channel. I don't remember if I did tutorials on those, but you can check those out on the channel. I may have tutorials up for them, but I'm not sure. I definitely completed them on the hard setting, I remember. But I think this game on normal is much harder than those games on hard. Those games are pretty easy even on hard from what I remember. So this game, this game's quite challenging. It's a lot harder than a lot of beat 'em ups, even on the easy setting. But very enjoyable and very learnable. I mean, the crowd control methods, once you learn good crowd control, you can apply that to most of the game. So it definitely carries over. You just have to manage it a little bit differently on each encounter, but you get the basic strategies down. You can just kind of adapt in the moment once you have some basics down. And I believe that's what the tutorial mostly focused on, was trying to just explain some of the basics, because then you can apply them yourself instead of... I don't really like to give step-by-step tutorials on a lot of games because you can see what I'm doing step-by-step. Unless there's something that I'm doing that's kind of, not the easiest thing to notice right away, then I may point it out. But I don't really like to say, go left, go right, and all this kind of shit. I like to give, kind of like some core basics, some, fundamental type of things that you can apply when you play the game. And usually what I go for mostly. If the game's super easy, then a lot of times I don't do tutorials because I find out I just don't have anything to fucking say. I don't like to... ramble about just complete bullshit. I like to actually, try to aim to explain some kind of strategy or something useful. So this is the final stretch, the final hallway of the game. And it gets pretty wild. It's pretty aggressive. So it'll definitely put your crowd control to the test, which is nice. It's good when, these beat 'em ups, ramp up the difficulty at a nice pace, which this game is well paced. It gets aggressively kind of like subtly harder and harder as you get farther. So, of course, this is going to be one of the hardest parts because it's the final hallway of the game. So, it does present a challenge. Of course, this is all edited down heavily. So, now this is the final boss. I do like to show the final boss in a lot of my old game reviews. But, yeah, it's a pretty cool final boss fight. Basically, just chase this guy around and try to punch him while taking out the minions. It's kind of a cool fight. I mean, it's not the most incredible final boss fight or anything, but it's pretty cool. It kind of reminds me of fighting Machine Gun Willie at the end of Double Dragon, which was always a fucking, classic fight. But it's a little bit like that. Though, I do prefer Machine Gun Willie, the peace-loving Machine Gun Willie, to this fight. But still, it's pretty cool. There is a decent variety of enemies, but there's not a huge variety. It is kind of a small variety, but it's not so low that it stands out. You know what I mean? It's kind of what was common for the beat 'em ups of this time, especially by Capcom. So it's definitely a serviceable amount of enemy types. And the challenge in the game is the way it mixes the different enemy types together in different encounters. That's part of the way it's balanced, and it feels good. It has a good balancing to it. It doesn't drag for too long. So yeah, I would say this is a very good beat 'em up for the system. Probably the best beat 'em up on the Sega CD, and I'd give it an 8 out of 10. Thanks for watching.